Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another installment of Positive Recovery MD, where we try to instill a healthy way of achieving well-being while you're in recovery or you don't even have a substance abuse issue. But we've got a great guest today, along with your host, Dr. Jason Powers, Julie DeNofa, and we've got Keith David, who was born in Harlem in New York, but he was raised in Corona, Queens. His mother, Dolores Nee Dickinson, was a manager at New York Telephone. And probably at the time, they used a switchboard with, you would call, if you wanted to call a neighbor, you would say, "Hey, Dolores, can I have 5?" And then she would like take one cord and then stick it in. And that's, anyway, I go off on tangents. His father, Lester Williams, worked as director of payroll operations. He initially intended to become an actor after playing the Cowardly Lion. There's a lion behind him. I love it. Also because my family's crest is a lion. We're the Levins. So I kind of love that. But he was the Cowardly Lion in the school production of The Wizard of Oz, went on to study at Manhattan's High School of Performing Arts. He also attended Juilliard School Drama Division 75 through 79. So I actually want to stop the introduction and just, Keith, ask you about that, because how many Black people were in Juilliard at the time? That was the 70s, 75, 79?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, there weren't a whole lot of us there. I mean, there were 4 Black members of my class, and to start out with, but in the class ahead, there were 2. When I came in in the first year, in the 3 years ahead of me, there were 2 in the senior class, I think 2 in the junior class, and 3 in the sophomore class, something like that. But like I said, it was just a handful of us. And to show you how the world has changed, when I went back for the 50th anniversary, there were 9 people of color in the same class.
And they're small classes, correct?
Well, the classes they start out at about 19 and 20. I don't remember what it was. We ended up with 50. We ended up with 15.
But I mean, everybody knows Juilliard. It's like Wharton School of Business. It's just one of those world-renowned places. And because of the time, I'm going to stop doing your introduction from Wikipedia. Anybody's listening can actually Google it. But, I immediately recognized his face and his voice. And I was just thinking, reading about you and Juilliard and everything. And being a man of color. And then around the time, he did have a lot of roles. You had a lot of roles where you were a pimp or whatnot. But to have that type of training and the depth, which now you show, because, I mean, if you're a gamer, you know who you are. You're every voice. You're just amazing. And you do have that sort of soothing, I don't want to say godlike, but it's just a fatherly, welcoming, just presence, which is amazing. And I would be annoyed as hell if every time I, wanted to be in something, they wanted me to be a pimp. So that's just what came up for me. But why don't you tell us, because, this is a lot of people in recovery in your field and various, just kind of like tell us a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and where are you now in your road?
When I was coming up, especially being an actor, being in show business, there was a certain romanticism about drinking and using, and how it was just part of what we did. At the end of a show, you put out all that energy, and you need some release. You need a chill space, and mostly that manifested in going to the bar next door and getting something to eat and a few drinks. That started while we were in school, because we worked so hard in school. Every week we wind up having, there would be a beer bust, because the musicians at school would have concerts, and after the concert there would be a beer bust. They would serve beer and little finger food or whatever, and then you'd carry the party elsewhere. Carry on the after party. Then once we got into the world, that was the norm, the habit. You get out of the performance, and you go to the bar and have a few. Now, if you're an alcoholic like myself, a few would always be quite a few, and before you know it, you're staggering home. You're not just walking home, and that became such a regular habit. I mean, years of that's what we did, and if you add any other substances on top of that, which many times we did, then it was all bets were off. You just and that it just escalated because alcoholism, in my experience, is a disease of more. If this little bit was going to make me feel this good, well, more is going to make me feel so much better. And
that's my drug of choice, by the way.
Yes, and that thinking it went on and worked until it didn't, until more became, or the most became, the norm. You had to start out with the most. When you come in that hot, where are you going? I mean, there's really no place to go but down, because there's only so high you can get. There is an inevitable crash. I did find with my drinking that for years, when I thought that I can control my drinking and I was I could hold my 10 drinks and I'm still okay. Well, it got to the point where a drink and a half and I was pretty wasted. But of course, I also drank doubles. So I couldn't, you can't walk on one leg. So,
How was your liver at the time?
Well, I mean, praise God, I still have one and it still functions pretty well. I mean, I have been on this road to recovery now for 17 years. And I'm glad I stopped. I stopped in my mid-40s. I believe, I don't know how true this is literally, but I believe at the point that I stopped, it was just before the trouble would have started. I had a mild pancreatic issue. Actually, while I was in recovery, I just had this horrible pain, and they told me it was pancreatitis or pancreatitis. I didn't remember. I hadn't been drinking then for almost 4 weeks. I couldn't remember ever being in that kind of pain before. And then when I did think about it, I said, well, if I ever was in that kind of pain before, I would always drink it away, try to drink it away. And I do remember a friend who had pancreatitis, or active what do you call it? Pancreatitis?
Pancreatitis. You had it right.
Pancreatitis. And if you hear that, what is that? And when you find out what it is and what it does, this lady who was a friend of mine, I don't know if she's alive today. I haven't been able to trace her, but I remember she went into hospital for pancreatitis and came out, and I went to see her when she came out and said, how you doing? And she started out, and this was 11 o'clock in the morning, and she was already drinking a highball glass full of E&J. And I'm like, that cannot be a good thing. First of all, E&J is such cheap booze. I mean, to begin with, but it's like, wow, why would you do that? And I had another good buddy of mine. Once he was, the doctor told him, he said, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die. We went to breakfast. He ordered a double scotch. And I said, dude, you just told me, the doctor told you, if you don't stop drinking, he said, well, I'm going to die anyway. And I mean, that is alcoholic stinking thinking. And
how did you know you were an alcoholic though? Did you have any?
I come from a long line of alcoholics. My paternal grandfather was dead at 43 from this disease.
Oh.
No. That was my maternal grandfather. My paternal grandfather was dead at 37 from this disease. So, I mean, and I, as much as I drank, to me, since I wasn't laying in the street, I didn't lose my job, but my lights weren't turned off, all those things made me think that I wasn't an alcoholic.
Right.
And then even once I got in the program and distinguishing myself between being an alcoholic, what is the difference between an alcoholic and a heavy drinker? I knew I was a heavy drinker, but, I didn't recognize the telltale signs. I didn't want to recognize them because I didn't want to be an alcoholic.
But you know the difference between an alcoholic and a heavy drinker is alcoholic have to take the steps.
Well, and one other distinction I would make is a heavy drinker can, not that they usually do, but they can stop when they want to. And they go through periods of, staying stopped. And so they can exercise a modicum of control. Whereas the alcoholic, in my experience, cannot, certainly does not. I listened recently to a friend of mine who asked me about the rooms, and I informed them, I gave them some meeting choices. And then they chose to say, well, no, I'm going to control it the way I want to, slowing down only on weekends, and it's not for me to call anyone else an alcoholic. It certainly is. It's an inside job, right. And you have to admit it to yourself, to your innermost core. And it wasn't, and in the 17 years that I've been in the program, it seemed like every 5 years I had to take my will back and to see, well, since I was never really a wine drinker, let me drink some wine. Let me try wine. And then I discovered you can get just as drunk on wine as you can on vodka. Then the second time, I used to drink an Italian aperitif called Frene Branca. Mm. And it was really, it's an after dinner thing that helps you, with your digestion, after if you've been drinking a lot or after you eat, you have a little, well, it's 40 proof. So I would mix it with a little Coca-Cola and think, hey, again, I found a few of those you can get just as drunk as if you're drinking vodka. And very quickly, I had to concede to my innermost core that I am an alcoholic of the book brandishing kind. I'm a classic alcoholic. And there's no getting around it. I can't think my way out of it. I can't, sort of sneak a drink, because I've never had one drink ever. Even when I first started drinking, I had to drink the whole bottle or most of it. And that's what we do.
Can I press you a little bit on how you went into your first meeting? How did you concede to yourself? I know you tried other things, but you didn't lose. You were still employable.
My very first meeting, when I first moved to Los Angeles, I met a director and he said, I won't even begin to work with you until you stop drinking. I was like, well, that ain't happening. And then he took me to my first meeting.
Wow.
And it was somewhere around the farmer's market. And I sat there listening and I was like, oh my God. I mean, I've done some shit in my time, but I've never done anything. I mean, what these people are talking about, that ain't me. Yep. So I couldn't wait to get back into my car and smoke a joint. But now I realize how that was my disease, fighting for its own life, knowing that soon your time is up, buddy. Your time is coming. Now you're in denial right now. And I didn't, and it took me quite a few years to get there. But I look back at that time and I go, boy, that was the fight. Because when I finally came in, kicking and screaming, and I had recently come out, I went to rehab because my wife, who we just celebrated 20 years. We wouldn't have that 20 years if she hadn't said, you have a problem and either you take care of it or I'm out of here.
There you go.
So I went to rehab. And then I came out and I found the meeting where I met Griff, which was Bravo. I said, look, fellas, cocaine was my problem. And so cocaine and vodka, scotch. So I'm going to give that up. I don't want to do it, but I'm not going to give up marijuana. I'm going to smoke a joint. And so I was on the marijuana plan for a little while. And then finally, you're not really sober if you're smoking marijuana.
Right.
And it got to the point where I love smoking a joint. And I love, I used to excuse my alcoholism because I would say, I just love altered states,
Right. And you're an artist, so.
The truth is, not this very moment as we're in, but let's just, for the sake of argument, sometimes I get a feeling like, oh, I'd love to be stoned, but I want to be stoned right here, right now, just this moment. I don't want to be high 10 minutes from now.
Yeah.
I have something to do. But right now, while I have a free moment, I wouldn't mind being a little buzzed. But it doesn't work like that.
Right.
And it never worked like that.
Right.
You know, I mean, the truth of the matter is, if you are up to anything positive or constructive in your life, you don't have time to be high like that. Even for the quote unquote normal person who can exercise some control, they don't really have time either. But if they can be productive most of the time and take a moment off and that be it, hey, so be it. I wish I was that guy. I'm not that guy. I have tried 6 ways to Sunday to finagle my way into being that guy. I've never been that guy, ain't gonna be that guy.
So Keith, was it like a spiritual kind of disconnect for you when you were continuing the marijuana use, but really kind of working an active program of AA? So how was that?
Well, I mean, there comes a moment. There comes a moment when you do realize that it is a spiritual disconnect, because I have always wanted to have a great relationship with God. I've always believed in a God of my understanding, who I'm not afraid to call God. I no longer think of him as some sort of white bearded guy sitting on a throne with thunderbolts like Zeus. I know that my God is spirit, which exists both inside of me and manifests itself outside all around me. In adhering to the program and trying to get a closer walk with God, trying to see my higher power as an integral part of my life, you realize that, wow, I don't want anything to interfere with that. It's like when you begin to meditate, and I'd heard this years ago. When you begin to meditate, you don't want to be high because you don't want anything. I mean, meditation is hard enough to focus your attention, let alone trying to be stoned. Although, and I've had what I thought was a few wonderful meditation sessions while I was high, but not really.
So with that spiritual kind of reconnect that you were having, you're in a lot of fatherly kind of guiding roles. Do you feel like you gained some insight in recovery? Like in your recovery, have you gained insight that's helped you, like in your craft around that?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've learned is, you walk the walk. If you're going to walk the walk, if you're going to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. I mean, when I was growing up, and my mother said, "Do what I say, do not what I do," because my mother wasn't an alcoholic, but she drank. Whether or not I believed it or not, I understood it. But like I said, my mother wasn't an alcoholic, so it wasn't about trying to demonstrate something that was far-fetched. At the time that she would say that, I was a young man, a teen, so I couldn't drink like an adult. Shouldn't be trying to drink like an adult. But it's a different era now. And I can't say to my children, do as I say, do not as I do. They don't go for that. And I realize the depth of the value being that example. I used to dream of, when my son gets to be 16, I'm going to smoke a joint with him. By the time he was 16, he was smoking a joint, but I wasn't living with him.
Oh.
So I couldn't, and I'd taken him to many AA meetings, but he lived with his mother, and there were freedoms and allowances that wouldn't have held in my house. And of course it's very different, and I remember when my parents separated, and it was, if my mother asked my father to talk to me about something, I'd be on the phone. Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. It wasn't going to fly. He wasn't there to execute it anyway. And I realized that when you're in the house, you got to be the example. You can't, it's just like you can't, think your way into right thinking. You have to act your way into right thinking.
Exactly.
It's not what no one arrests you for what you think. It's what you do. And you have to do that. And now I try to embrace better behavior. Although, thought patterns die hard. They come back. And that's why it's a renewable program. That's why you have to do it every day.
Right.
Because if you know, they say, I mean, and I think it is true if you look at patterns of people who go out, if not, sometimes they skip meetings and their meetings fall off. But, going to meetings alone, and I, again, learned this the hard way, going to meetings alone does not keep you sober. You have to exercise the principles in the program, in the book. And only because of late, I've begun to embrace them more deeply, getting into yet another 6th and 7th step, looking at my character defects and because some of my character defects, some of the behavior of my character defects, the literal behavior, I wasn't recognizing them as defects. I mean, maybe a fault here, and I had to realize and to really call myself on what I'm going to call a very expedient integrity, and in my alcoholic stinking thinking, my integrity was quite expedient. It was certainly easy when it was easy, but when I could hedge a bet, and then I realized that the other part of my disease is not just drinking and using. It's getting away with it. And you start flirting with that. How much can you get away with? And that manifests even in the hoarding of my personal time. When I first stopped drinking and using, it's like, what am I going to do with myself? What am I going to do with my time? I spent so much time sneaking around, getting away with it. What I was going to do, and for quite a long time, even my new drug of choice became the steam room. And I would love to I'd go get some heat. I mean, I did that when I was stoned, but but being sober, it's a whole different experience. And it's like, so I would hoard that time. And sometimes I didn't want to tell my wife I'm at the baths. Why? What the fuck is wrong with you? And it's just, it's a mentality that one gets used to. It took me, years into my marriage to understand deeply that letting my mate know where I am when I'm there is not reporting to her like she's some kind of
overseer.
An officer, a parole officer. She's my wife. She wants to know that I'm okay, and that's okay. And if you ain't doing nothing that that you shouldn't be doing, you shouldn't be afraid to say it. Right. Tell her where you are.
Right on.
And that's but again, it's a weird, stinking thinking mentality. I want to have something for myself.
Right.
I want to have some moment to myself. I don't have to be getting high or sneaking off with somebody or something. I just want to have this moment to myself. I don't want to tell nobody where I am. I mean, I don't like the concept of Big Brother. That's why, having my phone and pinging and find your phone and all that stuff. Nowadays, even without slipping a chip under your wrist or somewhere in your skin, they know where you are. They can find you if they really want to find you. I mean, so not that I necessarily have to give in to every little moment of that, but the reality is, if you're not doing something that you don't want nobody to see, why shouldn't they know where you are?
So let me get into a few questions. I want to ask about what has been, out of every role on any medium, what has been your favorite? Which is the one so far in your life that you really thought, okay, that spoke to me, and I was able to express what I think the essence of that was to other people, or whatever.
I mean, I have several of those. One of my favorite things that I've done is I played Paul Robeson, and I felt that I was able to bring something to the table, and part of it is, I used to want to be a minister for real, and now I believe acting is my ministry. So, and when I played Paul Robeson, his father was a minister, and I believe now here's an extremely evolved human being, but he also had his humanity. He had his, flaws, foibles, he was a man, and it was great being able to experience that even with all his greatness.
Mm.
I spent 4 years playing Bishop Greenleaf.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that was, wouldn't have happened if I wasn't sober.
There were so many parallels in Greenleaf to recovery. Like that must have just been really easy for you.
I mean, easy is relative.
Yeah.
But it was an easy channel to open up to. Again, I mean, when you're in recovery and you're in the service of God, doing God's work, it's a flow. And you're a channel, and you let that flow through you. And it was such a gift to have the bishop to flow through me. And I there were so many points of connection that I could make. We both have. He had 4 children. One passed away, so now he lives with 3 children. I live with 3 children. I have a dynamic wife. She's not Lady May, but she's dynamic. The fact that he's at a point in his life where he wants to take responsibility for the things in his life where his ambition overrode his integrity.
Mm.
And even walking with God, how there were many expediencies that he had to become accountable for. And I see that. I mean, I experienced that deeply. Because I don't want my life to crash and burn, you got to look at that differently.
Yeah, and it sounds like you definitely are. Is there a role still out there you have yet to play that is within reach that you would just love to do, or no? The answer could be
Frederick Douglass right now.
Are you close to getting it?
I'm working on a piece where I do get to play him. I'd love to play him in a Steven Spielberg movie.
Okay, I'll talk to Steve in a minute. Okay. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word? I could make a case for motherfucker.
All right, Samuel Jackson, take it easy.
What is my favorite word? I have a couple, and I can't think of either one of them right this second.
Motherfucker's great. It really is.
Let's stick with that.
What's your least favorite word?
Stupid and no.
Okay. And your favorite sound?
One of my favorite sounds is ripping Velcro. The sound of whoosh.
Yep. Like those old wallets.
I just love that sound.
All right. Well, we'll send you some Velcro along with the book. And what's your least favorite sound?
A fly in my ear.
Does that happen frequently?
Well, I mean, it depends on where you are.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
horseback. I like the horseback ride, and that fly buzzing past. I mean,
I'm with you. That's not good. Let's say that starting as a young man, you could have given a go at any vocation in the world. I know what you're going to say, I think, but what other vocation would you have liked to have done with your life?
I wonder if I really could have devoted myself to being a preacher as a young man, but I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted, the law fascinates me, and being able to think like that. And, I'm not so much interested in being crooked about it,
right.
Getting off criminals. But I am interested in knowing the law to the point where, I might not choose to argue for this man's rights like that, but to be able to know it that well.
Right.
Does fascinate me. It's fascinating when you get guys like professors who are not in the government, but they know government procedure so well that they can, they call them for the experts to say, what you're doing here really is unconstitutional. And you don't have to be a Supreme Court judge to say that, because I have studied enough of law and what these means, and also how the United States government, I can make a big case about how it really is an exercise in obfuscation.
Yes.
And that's what the Constitution is really about. It has nothing to do with freedoms for the people, but it does have, how can I use words romantically and obfuscate the underlying truth that this is the boys' club. And if you don't know how to navigate through the boys' club, well, shame on you. too bad for you.
Yeah, I can see that. What vocation would you loathe to do?
I used to want to be a police officer, and but now it's become such that it can be rather loathsome in protecting, quote unquote, the law, because again, the laws are built to obfuscate freedoms for certain people, for big swaths and sects of the people, whether, and it's mostly economic, but we obscure those things by making it about ethnicity and culture, because I only believe there's only one race. There's only a human race. Even by calling it separation of races and whatnot is obfuscating the fact that you just want to deny my humanity.
It's a nice perspective.
It has nothing to do with the color of my skin. You make it about the color of my skin, but this is about denying my humanity so you can have more.
Yes. Okay. So last question from me, and this segment is, assuming there's a God, which I think we're all okay with on the show at the moment, when you die and you're at the pearly gates, what would you like to hear come out of God's mouth? Well, motherfucker.
Come in, motherfucker.
Awesome. Love it.
Come on in.
At Positive Recovery Centers, we use a book that's called Positive Recovery Daily Guide that was authored by Dr. Powers. And we sent over to Hugo a positive intervention for you to maybe participate in. So I'm going to start by reading a quote and then explain a little bit about the positive intervention. And if you could give us some feedback on what you did with this information and share with the listeners, we would so appreciate it.
Okay.
So the quote is by George Santayana. Knowledge of what is possible is the beginning of happiness. Happiness, like recovery, is a verb, and recovery, like happiness, begins with the knowledge that it is conceivable to live the best life possible. This knowledge alone may not avail people, but it is an important start. Simply knowing you can experience happiness in the upper reaches of what's possible and flourish in recovery is not enough. You must get busy. Positive thinking like this is only as powerful as the grit you use to fulfill your potential and forge your legacy. Experiencing the maximum amount of happiness only begins with thinking you can maintain stable, long-term recovery. In active addiction, hope shrinks and withers away. After several unsuccessful attempts to quit, one can feel helpless, dejected, and fearful that one will never again live a life free from addiction's bondage. However, after meeting legions of recovering addicts and discovering that people can live in ways exceeding their wishes, people can develop faith in the knowledge that authentic happiness is within their grasp. So today's PI, we asked for folks to put down your past achievements to fuel your hope for the future. So we asked on a clean sheet of paper in your journal, in your notebook, to write down 5 accomplishments that once seemed so distant or remote or nearly impossible to achieve. And some of those would be examples of like reaching a certain level of sobriety, graduating from school. For some, it could be living in your own apartment, experiencing a connection with your spiritual side, and so forth. So we ask that you write that down, kind of a realistic stretch goals, challenging yet doable for goals for you to hope for in your future. So we ask then that you would reflect on whether you've developed any insights by recognizing and acknowledging your past achievements. So did you get to participate, Keith, in that?
I did.
Fantastic. We can't wait to hear.
Well, I mean, those first 5 things was, I had no idea because, certainly while in my active addiction, I was about to mess it up. But I just celebrated 20 years of marriage. And so that first part of that is that my marriage lasted for 20 years. And after 20 years, we're celebrating and we're still speaking. She still likes me, Who'd have thunk it? I have an opportunity to go back to school, and I started, I have a long way to go, but I started a seminary course. So I before I leave the planet, I'd like to have my master's in divinity.
Nice.
So that's on the table as a possibility. I have the opportunity to produce and direct. Who'd have thunk it? I wanted, even though I made my living as a singer, I was a singer before I was an actor, but certainly in my active addiction, I would, you interfere with the blessing. That's also the that romantic misnomer that, a drink is going to calm my nerves, it's going to make me better. You get past those things. You're not good because of those things. You're good in spite of those things, actually. And I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't sober. I could not have known that profoundly if I wasn't sober. And I had no idea that wanting to embrace my sobriety in a deeper, more meaningful way would ever be part of what I wanted to do. These days, embracing my sobriety more deeply, getting into the book, and actively wanting to practice these principles in all my affairs. It's very difficult, but no one among us practices these things perfectly. But I no longer also want to make an excuse about why I can't at least put one foot in front of the other in an attempt to embrace it fully. It's a difficult life challenge, but that's life. That's what it is. And, because living expediently, there's a drawback. There's a mental and a spiritual drawback, because you always know, no matter how, you could run, but you can't hide from you. And you can kind of do it for a while, but there comes a time, at least in my experience, there comes a time when you're looking at the guy in the mirror and you got to go, listen, dude, that's just a lie. It's just a fucking lie. Excuse my French. So what are you going to do? And I don't like being a liar. It's, of all the things you could, you said, what's the worst word? That's also not pretty, especially to yourself. I think the worst part to me about being a drunk and being a junkie is you have no word. You have no word. And I do believe that, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And the image of God that I think that we are created in is you have a inherent ability to recreate yourself, to speak yourself into existence, by living the words that you use, by being the words that you are.
So today, how would you finish this sentence? I am, what would you say?
I am today, right now, a man of my word.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and for doing that positive intervention. We find them to be really helpful within our organization and also with all of our staff. And it's a great way to stay focused and be intentional with the choices that we make day in and day out. And it sounds like that's exactly the life that you're living. That's my, that's what I set out to do every day. I don't try, because, sometimes trying is an excuse for failure, but that's what I set out to do every day. I don't always get there, but I set out to do that. Can I ask a favor? And if you don't want to, we can cut this out, but I would love, because I know that you're pretty stoked about this idea about the Nat King Cole tribute and with the 18-piece orchestra behind you. And I know that right now you just have a lion behind you, but would you sing just a tiny little something for us?
The very thought of you, the longing here for you, you'll never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you. I'm living in a kind of daydream. I'm happy as a king, and foolish as it may seem, to me that's everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And so very early on in the conversation, I think Dr. Powers made comment about how maybe you've been likened to the voice of God. And I hope that God's voice sounds like yours, because it is very soothing. Thank you so much for being part of us and part of our program today.
Well, I appreciate your asking. I'm glad to be here.
May you get Frederick Douglass. I'm going to send that out to the universe.
Woo!
And Spielberg.
Your lips to God's ears.
Hopefully. All right. Thanks again, man. Have a great
All right,
day.
man. Nice to see y'all.
Until next time, everybody, flourish in recovery. Signing off.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.